One of the major misconceptions about the root cause of the Uvalde shooting has to do with white supremacy. White supremacy isn't just upheld by white people. White supremacy is first and foremost cultural and spiritual. Okay? It is a culture of white supremacy. A culture, a culture, a culture. Now, let's talk about things that basically every race and every nation does, so to speak, if for nothing else, when they take over. They install their language as the main language of the region they take over. Okay? Like white people did with English in America. They install their school systems as the main school systems, if not the only school systems, in the region they take over. This is part of a nation declaring its supremacy. And if it is a ethnic nation, like Europe was, right, one ethnic group heavy kind of thing, excuse me, one racial group heavy, then they're declaring the supremacy of that racial group and that nation that took over, or that culture, etc. Pretty straightforward, right? No one, at this point, most people don't necessarily have a problem with it. Strangely enough, right? When you look at it, it's wrong. That's why the Bible says all the nations are wrong. And they're all going to hell. The wicked go down to the realm of the dead, all the nations that forget God. And Jesus is crushing the nations. In the Bible, Jesus is an idea superimposed on the top martial arts. He's crushing them and ruling them with an iron scepter. He's breaking them to pieces like pottery. Psalm 2 and Revelation. Okay, all the nations are wrong. And part of the reason why they're wrong is because they insist on the supremacy of worldly cultures and races who are associated with the world. So in a sense, all races are associated with the world. Now, in America, we have terms like Asian American and African American. Well, why? What does it mean? Why is it called this? Because they're in white cultures. They're whitewashed. And by being whitewashed, they're second-rate whites, second-rate Jews, second-rate white-skinned LGBT people. Okay? They're upholding white supremacy through cultural participation and complicity. And that's part of why it's collective guilt. If you will not stand with the most righteous person ever when he's combating white supremacy, you are upholding white supremacy, and you may as well be upholding white supremacy with extreme prejudice and extreme passion. There's no way around this argument. So now let's look at the mechanisms of the white establishment and the white power structure that came into play here in the Uvalde shooting. And I urge you to ignore the way I'm speaking and listen to what I'm saying, because they try to make it so I sound like a politician or some bitch-ass fucking reverend bitch shit like that. Okay, and I hate that, I hate that, I hate that. But you're not ready for the technological conversation. I'm a brain surgeon's son. I have an IT degree. I understand that some of the technology that goes into this. You're not ready for that. So focus on what I say. Focus on the fact that I say we're going to make a committee, and realize that cognitive impairment means nothing, because my argument is still moral precision, and it's still logical, and it still makes sense. And after I'm done, it's just bootlickers who fucking wouldn't stand with me, and nobody's worthy to continue my work. But listen carefully nonetheless. It is a systematic system, right? It systematically brings in white supremacy. And that there's an emphasis on financial control and sexual control and cultural control. There are social clubs and corporate groups and political groups, fraternities and sororities. Even gangs use Roman numerals quite often. They use the colors that are found on the flag quite often. They segregate in the prison system in a way that favors white people. If most of the guards are white, the police force is white, the government is mostly white, okay? And you're in a white prison gang, do you have the upper hand against the other races? You betcha. Because you're in a system of white supremacy, and they've broken down based on race. The simple answer is yes, you do. What do you think happens when a rich corporate guy gets locked up? Say Bill Gates gets locked up. What happens? Who's associating with who? Who's networking with who? Who wants who to win? In my particular case, it's overwhelmingly obvious. They went way out of their way to keep me from wearing martial art clothes because they didn't uphold white supremacy when someone like me is wearing them, and the associations you get when someone exactly like me is wearing the kung fu gi. They made so I had to wear glasses because they wanted me to look like a whitewashed black guy and not someone in a Royal African Falcon martial arts spirit. They changed my shape with poisons and fumes with over 22 witnesses. When I reported their racial harassment, and I have it on record, okay, 2 different times they ignored it. They ignored the hate crime on the wall at my house, on the wall bar backboard, whatever you want to call it, some kind of wall on the basketball court. They ignored the organized harassment campaign, and they called it vehicle infractions. And I brought it up again in the recording. I said, so you're going to ignore the racial harassment campaign against them, and you're not going to do anything about it. Paraphrasing, that you're not going to do anything about the racial harassment campaign against me. He said they're just mere vehicle infractions. It's like the Klan burns a cross on your lawn. He says, oh, just someone started a fire. And there's not much we can do about that. There's a lot you can do about that. He didn't say there's not much we can do about it. He basically implied that he doesn't want to do anything about it because there's a code of silence, and they'll crack down on him if he does, and he might not even want to do anything about it if there wasn't. That is a system of white supremacy. When a white-looking guy, whether he's from El Salvador or fucking Africa, if he's white-looking, and white guys stand down in a mostly Hispanic school when they're slaughtering them and even keeping their own parents from entering the campus, that is an act of white supremacy. Are we shocked? Are we like, how could they do it? They've never done that before. No, this is what they do. Is what they've always done. They have a history of doing it in a way that's acknowledged by society. So when they keep doing it, should we act like, wow, that couldn't be? Or do we know that's how it is? It is a culture of white supremacy. And when we look at the pagan cultures of Europe, bloodletting and bloodbaths like the Colosseum, the Vikings, the Goths, the Romans and the Greeks themselves, the Bacchanalia, part of their white supremacy cultural history is Greco-Roman bloodbaths and other bloodbaths and churches that pretend to be above that act as controlled opposition against that, who were some of the main people doing that. Neocolonialism is another sign of white supremacy. Institutional racism. And when these people say, well, prove it. Hey, no, that doesn't mean anything. That's denying it. When you deny that I'm right about this, especially by your actions, because actions speak louder than words, that's white denial. When you have the privilege to be part of the group that's doing this, and if you put on a suit, you could go to a nice restaurant and be more accepted in that restaurant than other races to a large degree, if not generally speaking, that is one example of white privilege. What you are privy to, like being in those white corporations and white social clubs, is another example of privilege. White privilege and what you are privy to know and what you're allowed to have. You're allowed to have your racial culture, but I'm not allowed to have mine. White people, in the name of white supremacy, can have free speech and they can assemble. But in the name of universal pinpointing moral precision and moral supremacy, the content of the character being better than the color of the skin, mind you, I'm not allowed to have free speech. I'm not allowed to have assembly. They suppress my videos, they fume me, and they harass me, even sexually harass me. LGBT people. And if you are an LGBT person, and you are not rallying to the most righteous person that ever lived, then you're part of the LGBT spirit of harassing me. One who's slack in his work is brother to one who destroys. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. Not to act is as much of an act as to act. And in this case, it's an act of cowardice, complicity, and overkill in the obvious collective guilt that they are part of, that they're in the spirit in. That they're in the spirit of collective guilt, is what I'm trying to say. Also, the brain functions in a way that when you speak a language for hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, okay, your brain wiring and your articulation are connected. And they say that linguistic intelligence is a form of intelligence, another form of white privilege. So you're speaking your language that people like you in England have been speaking for how many years? And I come from a patriarchal line where they speak Igbo, not English, not a Latin-based language, but masterfully, you're supposed to be smarter than me because I don't speak your racial and ethnic and national language better than you do or as well as you do. That's fucking retarded. That's that bullshit. You have gold diggers, where black people are basically among the, if not the poorest race in America. Last I checked, they have less than 1/2 of the capital, and they're around 13% of the population. So yes, being a gold digger is racist. Either you're dating a white guy or someone on his knees sucking a white fucking dick. And that's pathetic. That's pathetic. If that was my daughter, I would disown her immediately. If it was legal, I would flog her and imprison her. You can imagine the bootlicking cowards who would object to what I just said because they don't understand a word called morality. They don't understand morality. They don't understand morality. They have no viable counterargument. They don't understand what it means when you have no viable counterargument for a serious issue, and yet you pretend I'm wrong nonetheless. You pretend there's not the logical assumption and sound conclusion. All we have in life are logical assumptions and sound conclusions when you look at it scientifically. So I trust science when I say shut the fuck up. You people don't know what you're doing, or else you would be doing the right thing. While Mr. Right, on the right path, in his right mind, doing the right thing, who's the right one for any attractive woman not in my family. How you like that, you white supremacists? Did their white supremacy allow them a superior spirit to overcome my moral precision? These last 9 years when I challenged them with my up to $5 million top martial arts challenge, pay nothing if you lose? No, because they're in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome the light. And Isaiah showed us in the Old Testament, it's the light of justice. It is justice, universally pinpointed moral justice. Not white supremacy, not just ice, but moral precision and justice. So you see these people, they're just going to continue playing stupid while I'm racially harassed in the most populated state, okay, in one of the most populated countries in the world. They're going to continue playing their parts in the propaganda campaign, and they're going to continue pretending that because they've coerced non-white people to the point that they're helping them uphold white supremacy, coerced, tricked, and abused, that magically it's okay. And there's not just white people doing it. That's like if the Klan, and this happens sometimes, brings a few black people with them, magically it wasn't a hate crime. That is the kind of fucking stupidity that I hear every day, and not just from Republicans, but other bootlicking fucking cowards who must have been raised by a bitch.